Good morning. Thank you for joining me, for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the parables in Matthew's Gospel. And we're at the end of Matthew's Gospel, and so the parables are long, and they're not just extended object lessons like the parable of the sower, but they are short stories in themselves. And chapter 22. The parable of the marriage feast, verses 1 through 14, certainly falls into that category. Um, Jesus is in Jerusalem. He's at the temple. This is his final week. He's made his triumphal entry. He has literally occupied the temple with his followers, and they're hanging on his every word. And he's so popular that even though he's made himself absolutely crystal clear to the religious leaders, they are afraid to touch him because of his popularity. So Jesus continues to speak. Jesus answered and spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a great wedding feast for his son. And he sent out his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding feast, and they were unwilling to come. Again he sent out other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, behold, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen, my fattened livestock are all butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast.' But they paid no attention and went their way, one to his own farm, another to his business. And the rest seized his slaves and mistreated them and killed them. But the king was enraged and sent his emissaries and destroyed those murderers and set their city on fire. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding day is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main highways, and as many as you find there, invite them to the wedding feast.' And those slaves went out into the streets and gathered together all they found, both evil and good, and the wedding hall was filled with dinner guests. But when the king came in to look over the dinner guests, he saw there a man not dressed in wedding clothes. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you come in here without wedding clothes?' And he was speechless. And the king said to the servants, 'Bind him hand and foot, and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" Um, well, the first part of this is pretty straightforward, and it connects with the last parable, the parable of the wicked tenants, because we have a king and we have him sending out his slaves multiple times and them receiving ill treatment. This is not about getting, your year's income from your vineyard, but something much more happy. It's hosting a wedding feast, and for the king to invite you to his son's wedding. I mean, just imagine if you had been invited to Harry and Meghan's wedding a few years back. If you had received a formal invitation out of the blue, if you possibly could have been there, you would have been there, bearing that invitation, considering yourself, an honored guest. Well, we don't have the same kind of formal events and and the same kind of traditions that they did. It's even more so among them. And the wedding would not have been a one-day affair. The wedding of a king's son could have taken 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks in which you would have been wined and dined and entertained, and it would have been something that would have happened once in your lifetime. And so it's special. Um, the king is God. God is often the king in Jewish thought. The son, the bridegroom, is Jesus. Jesus has already called himself a bridegroom back in chapter 9 when John's disciples came and said, "Hey, we fast, the Pharisees fast. Why don't your disciples fast?" And he said, when the friends of the bridegroom are with the bridegroom, they don't fast. Time will come when they will, but they don't do that now. And he identified himself as the bridegroom. And there are different places, as we go further in Scripture, where the church, the kingdom, is the bride, as well, and Jesus is the groom. Sometimes the church is the body, and Jesus is the head. But sometimes the church is the bride, not anyone individually, but the kingdom of believers collectively. are the bride, and he is the groom. Other places, particularly at the end of the Bible itself, in the book of Revelation. Anyway, that these servants would be treated this way, that they'd be rejected at all, let alone beaten and murdered, would have been, we could not have imagined how shocking. Part of the story would have been to Jesus' first century listeners. And so the king did what was his prerogative to do, which was to kill those people and to burn their city down. And I'm certain this is prophetic, because in a few decades, Jerusalem is going to be absolutely burned and destroyed by the Romans. And Old Testament Judaism, in one moment, is going to be crushed with the iron fist of the Roman Empire, never to exist again. Can no more be a Mosaic Jew than you can be a superhero. You just can't. It doesn't exist. Not the way you and I can be first century Christians. And I'm certain that he's making reference to something historical that is about to happen to them because they rejected him. The part that I still don't understand is the part about the guest without the proper attire. I've read lots of and done a lot of research, and I don't know that I've ever found satisfaction in understanding what he's trying to get at. We know what the message is. Many are called, but few are chosen. As Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount back in Matthew chapter 7, a lot of people are going to call me Lord, but the only ones who are going to be entering in are the ones who do the will of my Father. And in this story, he says they go out and grab everybody, the good and the bad, kind of like the parable of the tares or the parable of the dragnet. Everybody gets gathered in, but not everybody gets in the end. And I'm certain that's eventually that's really what the mega message is at the end. I just don't understand how the man without the garment, you know, my impulse and many of your impulses would be, well, what if he's poor? What if he doesn't have, and anything to wear? They were invited in the street. Maybe he didn't know. Well, he would have known. He certainly would have known. Um, and so not wearing your best would have been an insult and an intentional insult. But this man is speechless. It's like he's surprised. That's the part that I don't really get at this point and may never get. If you go to the Manassas Church of Christ and you're watching this and you think you have the answer, the men who know exactly what this means, you guys can form a line at worship on Sunday morning, and I'll listen to you in order, because it will be a man who has it all figured out and who will be able to tell me exactly, without a doubt, what this means. Okay, well, wonderful short story, wonderful parable. It's something that we will continue to think about, and the meaning of it will continue to unfold to us the more we think about it. And yet, that mega message that he wants us to get, it's flashing in big lights. It's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And it's about doing the things Jesus has required. That's how we become accepted, not just wearing his name. Okay, we're going to turn to Matthew chapters 24 and 25 next time. I'm going to introduce the eschatological sermon that Jesus delivers, the last sermon in the book of Matthew. We'll look at the last two parables that he delivers in the Gospel of Matthew, both of which are in this sermon. We'll look there next time. Thank you for joining me for what is now nearly 10 good minutes with the Word.